And the question before the House is that the amendment be agreed to. I give the call to the member for Wentworth.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, could you think of a more beautifully ironic way for the government to debate a bill that concerns one of the greatest transparency features in our democracy, freedom of information? This government has moved debate on this bill in the Federation Chamber late on a Tuesday night, at the same time as the most critical environmental legislation is being considered in the main chamber. It's almost as if they hoped nobody would notice. I will not be supporting this legislation. This is a friendless bill that, unlike this debate, deserves to be buried. Deputy Speaker, FOI was established to give Australian citizens access to information about their government and bureaucracy and the decisions that impact their lives. It is an essential mechanism to ensure transparency, scrutiny and accountability in government and government institutions. FOI is not about making government's life easier. It is about citizens being able to hold their government to account. And at a time when all around the world confidence in our institutions is under attack from misinformation, disinformation, populism and opportunism, we cannot defend our democracy without transparency. But even before this legislation, access to freedom of information under this government is on the decline. In the last 5 years, the proportion of requests in full in FOI has declined from nearly 50% to 21%. Over the past 20 years, it's fallen from 77%. The government claimed that this legislation will modernise the FOI framework, drive efficiencies and clarify the cabinet exemptions and deliberative materials. And I want to be clear, no one I've spoken to disputes the premise that the FOI laws need to be modernised. In 2024, public servants spent more than 1 million hours processing 34,000 FOI requests, costing about $86 million. But in designing this bill, the government has failed to consult meaningfully non-government users of FOI system, the people who this FOI system is seeking to serve, and has failed to present key evidence to concerns relating to vexatious requests, the existence of AI bots and malicious foreign actors, all reasons that the government has used to justify this FOI bill in this state. So the FOI Act needs to be amended, but absolutely not in this process and absolutely not in this form. As the Centre for Public Integrity outlined in their submission to the bill in response to a Senate order for the production of documents seeking the evidence underpinning the government's claims about vexatious requests made by AI or other non-human actors and by criminal gangs, the government tabled only 2 articles from the United States and a general reference to some similar concerns arising in Australia, without providing any further supporting evidence. Ironically, the government declined to release other documents, citing cabinet confidentiality. The cost of efficiency cannot be such a substantial decline in transparency as this. So let me take you through a few key aspects of the bill and the effect that they will have on transparency. I will not speak to all measures on this bill. Firstly, the bill will introduce fees for non-personal requests. While acknowledging that all states currently charge for FOI requests, this change has attracted a great deal of criticism from journalists who claim any costs associated with FOI requests will deter public interest stories that often require chasing many leads, many of which don't go where. As William Summers wrote in Crikey, plans to charge journalists to access hidden documents is a disaster for public interest journalism, but a godsend for incompetent officials. Secondly, Schedule 2 of this bill seeks to prohibit anonymous requests by requiring applicants to include their full name as well as a statement from any person for whom the request is being made on behalf of. This, as critics have pointed out, would significantly restrict the potential whistleblowers or even journalists who may fear retaliation for seeking access to certain information from departments or public officials. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, this bill seeks to clarify cabinet exemptions and adjust the public interest test for deliberative documents. In practice, the legislation as drafted will expand the exemptions for cabinet documents and make it easier to refuse requests. It principally does this by requiring documents to be exempt from FOI only if they have substantial purpose for Cabinet briefings, rather than the current legislation that requires a dominant purpose. This expansion of the definition could easily include almost any document that at one point has been brought to Cabinet's attention. Professor of Policy ANU and respected long-serving public servant Andrew Podger argues this could be even used to restrict access to almost any document. Finally, the bill introduces a 40-hour processing cap for FOI requests. My concern with this element of the bill is not that it doesn't deal with what I and others believe has become an increasingly adversarial approach to FOI, where the default is to fight the request rather than to provide it. Costs and time for FOI have increased, as I mentioned earlier, but not because of the volume of requests. The Howard government made about 31,000 determinations in 2006 and 7 at a cost of around $25 million. Last year's financial 21,000 decisions cost $86 million. When this bill was introduced, Deputy Speaker, the Attorney-General asked the crossbench to consider these changes in good faith and not to jump to conclusions. Well, I did that. I listened to their arguments and was inclined to be sympathetic to the concerns about security threats and artificial intelligence. However, as time went on, it became increasingly clear that there was not evidence being provided for the claims that were made, but plenty of evidence that these changes will thwart the founding principles of FOI. Today, the Centre for Public Integrity, entitled, has released a report fact-checking 4 of the claims made by the government on this bill. They argue that each of the claims made by the government is demonstrably false, and I would like to refer to these in my speech. The first claim was actually through a question that I asked the Prime Minister in question time. I highlighted the concerns that the Robo-Debt Royal Commission had highlighted with FOI and asked the Prime Minister why, given he has a demonstrated commitment to dealing, I think, with the challenges of robo-debt and making sure they don't happen again, why he was bringing a bill into the House that would actually go against some of the points raised in the Robo-Debt Royal Commission. The Prime Minister, in relation to my question, said, "So let's not these," and I quote, "So let's not let those responsible for robo-debt off the hook by suggesting bizarrely that somehow reform of a system that is broken, the FOI system, has something to do with support for robo-debt." Now, I don't know why the Prime Minister asked like this, and perhaps he was misinformed, because if he had read the Robo-Debt Royal Commission or remembered this part of it, he would realise that the FOI bill, and particularly Cabinet confidentiality relating to FOI, was highlighted in the Robo-Debt Royal Commission as a major barrier. And I quote the Robo-Debt Royal Commission. "However, the government should end the blanket approach to confidentiality of Cabinet documents. To give effect to this, Section 34 of the FOI Act should be repealed. The wide range of class and conditional exemptions in the FOI Act is sufficient to protect the public interest in relation to Cabinet documents. The mere fact that a document is a Cabinet document should not by itself be regarded as justifying maintenance of its secrecy." That is the Robo-Debt Royal Commission. And so I will quote then what the Centre for Public Integrity said about this particular issue. And I quote, "It is false to say that the Robo-Debt Royal Commission did not find that Cabinet processes were the problem. The Royal Commission made a number of excoriating observations about the problems of Cabinet processes and recommended the repeal of the class-based exemption. It is also false to say that the problem revealed in the Royal Commission was the ministers acted directly in contravention of the advice they were given. The Royal Commission found that the failure of advice lay with public servants whose advice did not meet the standards of frank and fearless, even when protected by Cabinet confidentiality." So this is an issue raised in Parliament, and the government responded, but not accurately in terms of its relation to the Robo-Debt Royal Commission. Another crossbencher, Helen Haynes, the member for Indi, made again sort of concerns about the Cabinet confidentiality in FOI and the FOI bill, and raised this with the Attorney-General. And again, the Centre for Public Integrity again fact-checked the Attorney-General's response in question time and said, and let me quote. Sorry, my apologies for the delay. Quote to say the point that is the fact The first is that the changes to cabinet exemption are accepted by legal experts to be an expansion, not merely of a clarification of the exemption. We note here that the government has itself provided no legal advice to justify its claim that the amendments clarify the exemption. And secondly, the second point to make is that it's extremely misleading to claim that the amendments are even in part implementing the Robodebt Royal Commission's recommendations. Again, this is feedback from the Centre for Public Integrity on both the Prime Minister and the Attorney General's defence of the FOI bill in Parliament in the House. Then in terms of briefly, as I mentioned in my speech, there have been claims made by the government that the government has been inundated by FOI requests generated by AI bots, and that may be linked to foreign actors and criminal gangs, and that's the justification for this legislation. And again, the finding from this bill from the Centre for Public Integrity is, despite repeated questioning, the government has at no stage produced any evidence of an inundation of anonymous requests generated by AI bots linked to foreign actors, foreign powers or criminal gangs. The highest that has been stated is that the current FOI framework could be at risk or vulnerable to such use. And finally, the government also made the argument at times that national security concerns justify changes proposed in the FOI amendment bill. And then, to quote again the finding from the Centre for Public Integrity, there is no publicly available evidence that the FOI Act is currently being used by foreign actors or in a way that such as the National Security Services have proactively raised concerns. Rather, the Attorney General's Department requested advice from intelligence services about the risk of such events. I find this extremely disappointing to see that the government has justified an incredibly important piece of legislation when on justifications that cannot be backed up by facts or by evidence, or where these justifications certainly are not aligned to the actual facts in relation to the Robodebt Royal Commission in particular, given how important that Royal Commission is in Australian history. So let me come to my conclusion. This government has zero credibility with regards to strengthening its parliamentary transparency. They have been awarded a fail grade by the Centre for Public Integrity on their integrity report card, failing 5 of 6 indicators, including commitment to transparency. They continue to ignore calls to put in place proper appointment processes that would prevent jobs for mate. They fail to deal with lobbying transparency by, at a minimum, publishing who they sponsor to walk the halls with unfettered access. With this track record and the variety of unsubstantiated claims, it is genuinely hard to believe that the government can make the case that this bill is about strengthening the system. As the Centre for Public Integrity concludes, this bill, in quotes, represents an unprecedented and unjustified attack on the right of all Australians to access government information, which is an attack on the proper functioning of our democracy. And when I talk to members of my community, this is the sort of behaviour that they fear from a large major party majority. They fear that this sort of majority makes the government of the day overreach, and to take the support of the Australian community for granted, rather than guard and try and invest in the trust of the Australian community in its institutions. This government could use its significant majority in the House to drive a level of transparency across government which would be laudable. The government could look at FOI and say, how do we make more of our documents transparent to the community so that we can have more open public policy debates, so we can have more open public policy and that we increase trust in government? And they have chosen to do quite the opposite. I am incredibly disappointed with the government in choosing to spend their political capital and the time of this parliament on legislation that reduces public scrutiny and transparency, instead of tackling the hard reforms that will actually make the lives of ordinary working Australians better. I believe the government must do better on this. And finally, I would like to move a second reader amendment as circulated in my name.
Can I check with the member for Wentworth if we are talking about the same document? You don't have one circulated in your name at this point. You can take the option to read it in full now, but there is...
Sorry, I would like to use the document as circulated in my name. I can use that one. Yes, okay. Please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is this amendment seconded? Thank you, Member.
Amendment, I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much, Member for Warringah. And I think where's my little conclusion sheet? I might call on the member for... Oh, let me just... sorry, I'll just read through this just to tie that up before you both leave, just so everyone in the House is clear as to what's now before the Parliament. The original question was that this bill be now read a second time, and to this the honourable member for Curtin moved as an amendment that all words after that be omitted with a view to substituting other words. The honourable member for Wentworth has now moved as an amendment to that amendment that all words after House be omitted with a view to substituting other words. So the question before the House is that the amendment moved by the honourable member for Wentworth to the amendment moved by the honourable member for Curtin be agreed to. But I'm going to give the call to the member for Bean.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I move that the debate be adjourned.